I clutched the cashier's check so tightly my knuckles turned white. $28 million. The number didn't feel real, even though I had just signed the final papers selling my late brother's tech company. I grabbed my purse and practically ran out of the law office, my heart racing with a mixture of grief and relief. Tommy had built that company from nothing, and now it was sold to a Silicon Valley giant who promised to keep his vision alive. After 2 years of running it alone, trying to honor my brother's legacy while grieving his sudden heart attack at 59, I was finally free. I needed to tell my husband immediately. After 38 years of marriage, after all the struggles we had survived together, this changed everything. David could finally retire from that soul-crushing job at the insurance company. We could travel like we had always planned. We could help our daughter with her student loans. I drove straight to his office in downtown Seattle, my hands shaking on the steering wheel every time I glanced at my purse. When I walked into the reception area, his secretary Jennifer looked up with an odd expression on her face. Her eyes widened, and she stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice higher than usual. David didn't mention you were coming by." "I wanted to surprise him," I said, already heading toward his corner office. "Is he with a client?" "Actually, I think he stepped out for— Wait, Mrs. Patterson." But I was already at his door. I could hear voices inside, low and intimate. A woman's laugh, the kind that's meant for private moments. I pushed the door open. My husband of 38 years was standing by the window with a woman I recognized, Vanessa, Tommy's former executive assistant. She was maybe 35, tall and polished in a way I hadn't been in decades. David's hand was on her lower back. Her head was tilted toward his shoulder. They were standing close enough that I could see her perfume had left a faint mark on his collar. They both turned to look at me with that frozen, deer-in-headlights expression that confirmed everything I needed to know. The check in my purse suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Let me back up, because you need to understand how I ended up here. My name is Margaret Patterson, but everyone calls me Maggie. I was 62 years old when my entire world shifted on its axis in the space of 30 seconds. I met David when I was 24, working as a junior accountant at a small firm in Tacoma. He was charming, steady, responsible. He had a good job and a 5-year plan. My parents loved him. We got married 6 months after we met, and for a long time I thought I had done everything right. I gave up my career when our daughter Emily was born. David said it made more sense for me to stay home, that his salary was higher, that childcare would eat up everything I made anyway. So I became a full-time mother and housewife. I was good at it. I kept a beautiful home, raised a wonderful daughter, supported David's career by hosting dinners for his colleagues, and always being available when he needed me. The years blurred together. Emily grew up and moved to Portland for college. David climbed the corporate ladder. I volunteered at the library and took painting classes at the community center. We weren't unhappy, exactly. We were comfortable, familiar, but something had shifted after my brother Tommy died 2 years ago. Tommy had been my best friend, the only person who really understood me. When he had his heart attack at 59, I was devastated. He had never married, had poured everything into building his software company, and in his will, he left it all to me. "You're the only one who gets it, Maggie," he had told me once, years before he died. "You're the smartest person I know. You gave up too much for that husband of yours." I had laughed it off then. But when I inherited his company, DataStream Solutions, I discovered he was right. I was good at this. Really good. I stepped in as CEO, learned the business, made tough decisions. The employees respected me. Our clients trusted me. For the first time in decades, I felt like myself again. David had been supportive, or so I thought. He encouraged me to sell when I said the responsibility was overwhelming. He helped me interview potential buyers. He held my hand through the negotiations. Now, standing in his office doorway, watching him step away from Vanessa like I had caught them doing something far worse than whatever was actually happening, I started to see things differently. "Maggie," David said, his voice shifting into that smooth, calming tone he used when he was about to explain something to me like I was a child. "This isn't what it looks like." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, taking in every detail. Vanessa was wearing a designer dress that I knew cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. She had a diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist that looked familiar, though I couldn't place why. "I was just congratulating David on the sale," Vanessa said, her voice confident in a way that told me she had practiced this explanation. "Tommy would have been so proud that DataStream went to TechVision. They're going to do amazing things with his legacy." "How did you know the sale closed today?" I asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Vanessa's confident smile flickered. David's jaw tightened. I still have friends at DataStream," Vanessa said. "Word travels fast in the tech community." But the sale had closed less than an hour ago. The paperwork was confidential, and Vanessa had been fired from DataStream 6 months after Tommy died, escorted out by security for reasons I had never fully understood. "How long?" I asked, looking at David. "Maggie, please, let's go home and talk about this privately." "How long, David?" He glanced at Vanessa again. In that look, I saw years of secrets, years of lies. 3 years, Vanessa said, lifting her chin defiantly. "We've been together for 3 years, and honestly, Maggie, I think we're past the point of pretending. David deserves to be happy. You've been so wrapped up in playing CEO that you haven't even noticed he's been gone. 3 years. Since before Tommy died. Since before I inherited the company." I turned and walked out of the office without another word. Behind me, I heard David calling my name, but I kept walking. Through the reception area, where Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes. Into the elevator, where a young couple smiled at me, and I realized I must look normal, like someone who wasn't watching her marriage disintegrate in real time. I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost an hour. The check was still in my purse. $28 million that I had almost told David about. $28 million that would have become community property the moment he knew about it. Then I remembered something. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, scrolling back through messages from the past 6 months. There. An email from the TechVision acquisition team, sent to me and copied to my lawyer, outlining their initial offer for DataStream. $12 million less than what we eventually agreed on. I had negotiated hard for that additional $12 million. I had pushed back on their valuation, brought in independent analysts, threatened to walk away. My lawyer had been impressed. "You're a natural at this," she had said. But now I looked at the email thread differently. There was another name copied on those early emails, a consultant that TechVision had hired to evaluate DataStream's technology and market position, a consultant whose fees they had agreed to pay as part of the deal. Vanessa Monroe, Tech Acquisition Specialist. My hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from excitement. I drove home slowly, my mind racing. David arrived an hour later. He had flowers. He had that expression on his face, the one that said he was sorry and this was all a misunderstanding and I was overreacting. "It's not what you think," he said, setting the flowers on the kitchen counter. "Vanessa and I, yes, we were involved for a while. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake during a difficult time in our marriage. But it's over now. I ended it months ago. I love you, Maggie. I've loved you for 38 years. I looked at him. This man I had trusted with everything. This man I had given up my career for, my independence, my sense of self. "Okay," I said. The relief that washed over his face was almost funny. "Thank you," he said, reaching for my hand. "Thank you for understanding. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." I nodded. And inside, I began to plan. The next morning, I told David I needed some time to clear my head. I was going to visit Emily in Portland for a few days, I said. He agreed immediately, probably grateful for the breathing room to fully end things with Vanessa or to cover his tracks or whatever it was he needed to do. I did go to Portland. But I didn't stay with Emily. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown and met with a lawyer that my brother's attorney had recommended. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she specialized in complex divorces involving business assets and fraud. "Tell me everything," Patricia said, settling into her chair with a legal pad. I did. By the end of our 3-hour meeting, Patricia was taking notes so fast her hand cramped. "Your husband had a relationship with someone who is positioned to directly benefit from undervaluing your company," she said. "And you mentioned you don't have access to your joint accounts? He manages all the finances?" I nodded. "He always said he was better with money." He gives me a debit card for household expenses, but he monitors the account. I have to explain any unusual purchases. Patricia's expression hardened. Maggie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. Before your brother died, before you inherited the company, had David ever mentioned divorce? I started to say no, then stopped. There had been a conversation, maybe 4 years ago. David had come home from a dinner with his college friend Mark, who was going through a divorce. David had been drinking, and he'd said something about how maybe Mark had the right idea, that marriage was just a trap that kept people from living their lives. I had cried. He had apologized profusely the next day, said he was drunk and didn't mean it, that he loved me. But now, sitting in Patricia's office, I wondered. I think he did, I said slowly. But then Tommy died and I inherited everything, and suddenly David was very attentive again, very involved in the company, very interested in helping me make decisions. We need to hire a forensic accountant, Patricia said, and a private investigator. If I'm right about this, and I really hope I'm wrong, your husband may have been planning to divorce you after the company was sold. He would have been entitled to half of the sale proceeds as community property. But if he influenced the sale price downward through Vanessa's involvement, he may have been planning to pocket the difference somehow. My stomach turned. That's not possible. Is it? Let me dig, Patricia said. Can you stay in this marriage for a few more months without letting him know you suspect anything? I thought about 38 years of making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I can do it, I said. The private investigator's name was Marcus Wu, and he was worth every penny of his considerable fee. Within 3 weeks, he had documented that David and Vanessa's relationship was very much ongoing. They met at an apartment in Belltown that was rented under an LLC. They took trips together, always when David claimed to be at insurance conferences. But Marcus found something even more disturbing. 6 months before Tommy died, David had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on me. He was the sole beneficiary. It's not illegal, Marcus told me carefully. Spouses insure each other all the time. But the timing is interesting. This was right around when your brother's health started declining, when it became clear you might inherit something significant. I felt sick. You think he was going to kill me? I think we should be very careful, Marcus said. I've installed security cameras at your house, disguised as regular household items, and I've given your lawyer copies of everything. If anything happens to you, David won't get away with it. The forensic accountant, a sharp woman named Lisa Park, found the real smoking gun. Vanessa hadn't just been a consultant on the TechVision acquisition, she had also received a $2.3 million finder's fee for bringing the deal together, paid by a shell company that was funded by transfers from David's hidden accounts. David had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for years, building up a nest egg I knew nothing about. And when the DataStream sale was negotiated, he had worked with Vanessa to lowball the initial offer, then position himself as the supportive husband encouraging me to take the deal. If I had sold for the initial $12 million, Vanessa would have gotten her finder's fee, David would have been entitled to $6 million in the divorce, and he would have walked away with close to $10 million total while I got $6 million and thought I was lucky. But I had fought for more. I had negotiated like Tommy had taught me, like the capable businesswoman I had forgotten I could be. And now I had $28 million, all of it technically community property, but all of it in an account that only I could access. He doesn't know about the sale yet, I told Patricia. I never got the chance to tell him that day. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Good. Let's keep it that way. For the next 4 months, I played the role of my life. I went home and acted like the forgiving wife who was working through her husband's infidelity. I cooked his favorite meals. I went to his office Christmas party and smiled while Vanessa watched from across the room with barely concealed contempt. And the whole time, we were building our case. Lisa discovered that David had been hiding income for years, underreporting to the IRS, using his insurance company connections to create fraudulent policies and pocket the premiums. He had committed wire fraud, tax evasion, and insurance fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia put together a divorce filing that was 53 pages long. We documented everything, every asset he had hidden, every affair, every lie, every fraudulent transaction. And then we waited for the perfect moment. That moment came at the memorial service for Tommy. It was the 2-year anniversary of his death, and I had organized a celebration of life event at a beautiful venue on Lake Washington. I had invited everyone who had known him, his employees from DataStream, both past and present, his friends, his business contacts, and I had invited David's colleagues from the insurance company, the people he had worked with for 30 years. 200 people gathered to remember my brother. I gave a speech about his generosity, his brilliance, his love of innovation. I talked about how he had built something amazing from nothing and how proud I was that his legacy would continue through TechVision. Tommy left me everything, I said, my voice carrying across the room, his company, his vision, his trust, and 6 weeks ago, I sold DataStream Solutions to TechVision for $28 million. I watched David's face from the podium. I saw the exact moment the number registered. 28 million. Not the 16 million he thought I had settled for. 28 million that he hadn't known about, that he couldn't plan for, that he thought he could manipulate. Tommy always told me I was smarter than I believed I was, I continued, that I had given up too much, that I deserved better, and he was right. The doors at the back of the venue opened. 2 FBI agents in dark suits walked in, followed by Patricia and 2 IRS investigators. The room fell silent except for the gentle sound of water lapping against the dock outside. "David Patterson," one of the agents said, walking toward where my husband stood, frozen by the bar. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, insurance fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The eruption was immediate. Gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs as people stood up to see what was happening. Emily grabbed my arm from where she stood beside the podium. "Mom?" she whispered. "What's going on?" David was shouting that there had been a mistake, that he wanted his lawyer, that this was harassment. But the agents were already reading him his rights, already putting handcuffs on his wrists. As they led him past the podium, he looked up at me with pure hatred in his eyes. "You bitch," he hissed. "You ungrateful, conniving bitch. I gave you everything." I looked down at him. This man who had controlled my life for 38 years, who had made me feel small and incapable and lucky to have him. "No, David," I said clearly, making sure everyone in the room could hear me. "You took everything, my career, my confidence, my sense of self. You stole from our family. You lied to me for years. And you worked with your mistress to cheat me out of millions of dollars from my brother's company. The only mistake you made was underestimating me." I pulled out a folder from the podium and held it up. "I have copies of everything, every hidden account, every fraudulent insurance policy, every transfer to Vanessa Monroe. The FBI has had all of this for months. You're done." His face went white. "Vanessa," he said. "Where's Vanessa?" Patricia stepped forward. "Miss Monroe was arrested at her apartment 3 hours ago. She's being charged as a co-conspirator. The IRS is particularly interested in that $2. $3 million finder's fee she never reported as income." As the agents took David away, I looked out at the shocked faces of everyone who had known Tommy. My daughter was crying, but she squeezed my hand tight. "Tommy would be so proud of you," she whispered. The divorce took 7 months to finalize. David's lawyers tried everything, but the evidence was insurmountable. The court found that he had systematically hidden assets, committed fraud, and financially abused me for decades. I was awarded our home, 75% of all marital assets, including David's retirement accounts and the money he had hidden, and full restitution for the years of financial control and deception. David's remaining assets were seized to pay his tax debts, legal fees, and restitution for the insurance fraud victims. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Vanessa got 3 years for her role in the conspiracy. Last I heard, she was working in the prison library, a far cry from her corner office and designer wardrobe. I didn't waste energy thinking about either of them. Instead, I built the life I should have had all along. I went back to school and finished my MBA at 63. I started a consulting firm helping family businesses navigate succession planning and sales. I traveled to Japan, to New Zealand, to Ireland, all the places David had always been too busy to visit. I reconnected with friends from my accounting days, women who had kept working and building careers while I had stayed home. They welcomed me back with open arms and no judgment. and I started a foundation. I called it the Tommy Patterson Foundation for Second Chances. It provides business education, legal support, and startup funding for women over 50 who want to launch businesses or return to careers they left behind. In the 3 years since I started the foundation, we've helped 87 women start businesses, complete degrees, or escape financially controlling relationships. Every single one of them inspires me. Last week, I received a letter from David. He's being released early for good behavior. He wanted to know if we could meet, talk about the past, maybe find forgiveness. I threw the letter away without finishing it. Emily thinks I should at least hear him out. She says he's her father, that people can change, that holding on to anger only hurts me. But she doesn't understand. I'm not holding on to anger. I let go of my anger years ago, somewhere between Tokyo and Auckland, between my first published business article and my 10th consulting contract. What I'm holding on to is my self-respect. The knowledge that I finally stood up for myself after almost 4 decades of being told I wasn't smart enough, capable enough, strong enough. David doesn't deserve my time, let alone my forgiveness. He spent 38 years treating me like property, like someone who existed only to make his life easier. He lied to my face thousands of times. He worked with his mistress to steal from me and my brother's memory. He took out a life insurance policy on me like I was an asset to be liquidated. Forgiveness isn't required. It's certainly not owed, and I don't need it to move forward. My daughter is starting to understand. She's now the director of operations for the Tommy Patterson Foundation, and she sees every day what happens when women decide they deserve better. As for me, I'm 65 years old now, and I'm living the life I always wanted but never thought I could have. I published a book last year about navigating business sales and protecting yourself from fraud. It became a bestseller in the business category, and I've been invited to speak at conferences around the country. I still live in the house I fought for, but I've made it completely mine. David's dark, heavy furniture is gone. The walls are painted in colors I love. My office has windows overlooking the garden I planted, full of flowers Tommy and I loved as children. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I think about the woman I used to be. The woman who asked permission to buy a new dress. The woman who believed her husband when he said she wasn't smart enough to understand finances. The woman who thought she was lucky to be chosen. I wish I could go back and tell her that she was capable of so much more than she knew, that she didn't need permission to take up space in the world, that the voice in her head telling her she wasn't enough was wrong. But I can't go back. I can only go forward. And forward, for the first time in my life, looks absolutely extraordinary. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. It's not too late. It's never too late. I was 62 years old when I finally broke free. And these past 3 years have been the richest, fullest, most authentic years of my life. You deserve better. You deserve to be treated as an equal partner, not as property. You deserve to make your own decisions about your own money. You deserve to take up space without apologizing. And if anyone tells you that you're too old to start over, that you should just be grateful for what you have, that you're being difficult by demanding respect, tell them about Margaret Patterson. Tell them about the woman who spent 38 years being small and quiet and convenient, who finally stood up and discovered she was powerful beyond measure. The sun is shining on my garden right now. I'm about to have coffee with 2 women from my MBA program who are starting a business together. Tomorrow, I'm flying to Chicago to speak at a women's business conference. Next month, I'm going to Scotland with Emily, just the 2 of us. And I intend to enjoy every single moment of it.